It's FPA, I just have it saved, and then it's 19.
Good evening. Time being 7 o'clock, I call the December 17th meeting of the Joint Budget
Recording in
Subcommittee
progress.
to order. Please pause for a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, all citizens are welcome to attend public meetings in person. To view the live meeting remotely, citizens are encouraged to watch the live stream on the Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel or the live broadcast on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29. Meetings are also archived by Franklin TV on the Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel and shown on repeat on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29 for those who missed the live meeting. To listen to the meeting remotely, citizens may call in using this number, 929-205-6099. This will not permit participation in the meeting. To participate in the meeting remotely, citizens are able to join a Zoom webinar using the information provided. Zoom webinar ID 828-6581-8882. Then you need to hit the pound sign. Once again, the webinar ID is 828-6581-8882 pound. Any participants who wish to speak during the webinar must enter their full name and email address when joining the webinar. All participants will be automatically muted upon joining the webinar. In order to speak, participants who have entered full name and email address will need to select the raise hand function to request to be unmuted. All speakers will be required to state their full name and street address before commenting. Okay, moving right into the agenda. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes, and I know you'll see here minutes from a year ago, but these minutes have never been approved. It's taken us a while to put them together, and just so that everybody understands, if you weren't part of the Joint Budget Subcommittee, you can still vote on these minutes. So let's take them one at a time. March 8th, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from March 8th, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes of March 8th, 2023.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I now entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from August 2nd, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes of August 2nd, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, additions, deletions? Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from October 11th, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes from October 11th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, entertain a motion to approve the minutes from March 6th, 2024.
Motion to approve the minutes from March 6th, 2024.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, last one. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from October 23rd, 2024.
Motion to approve the minutes from October 23rd, 2024.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Oh, I know.
Yes. Good.
Hopefully now with new systems in place, we'll be up to date with the minutes and on an ongoing basis. So thank you for catching up. Okay, next item on the agenda is an update on the 5-year forecast sketch. Jamie?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, through to the committee and the folks listening at home. Again, if people are looking for the material that I'm referencing, you can go to franklinma.gov, go to the town calendar, go to tonight's meeting, and there's a packet right there with all of the information. Suffice to say, there are still a few adjustments that have been made. There's a very small number of adjustments that have been made since the last fiscal forecast. Just for the public that's watching at home and listening in, this is what our life is like as a staff year-round. We never stop the budget. You're getting a full glimpse into the month by month by month of what we do. So what we're doing here is we're putting out publicly exactly what we've been doing for decades and what every school and town district does in Massachusetts. They continually update their numbers as in the budget model as more concrete, firm information comes in. So I'm going to go through the next steps in a minute, but as everybody can see up on the screen here in the red, and it's also in the packet, we estimate after these adjustments, which again are not final, and we'll go through that real quick in a second, we're estimating based on the pension, Norfolk County Pension Retirement System adjustment, which was a vote of the county retirement board. So that actually is a firm number and will not change for FY26, which is good. I'll answer questions if people have them. I don't want to give a huge pension lesson necessarily tonight, but so you're looking at about a $4.2 to $4.75 million deficit, which is about $1 million more than it was a couple months ago. One, because of the pension assessment increase than what we had projected, which was much higher, but also, more importantly, the 5.3% increase that we got quoted on our health insurance for our employee health care. And so when you add all of that up, it's about $500,000 that's been added to this number that's up in red in the forecast. That number, and I editorialized this in the memo, that did not, we got that Friday at like noon. We met with our healthcare carrier, and they gave us a preliminary number of 18.3%. People, of course, are going to ask why. That's because healthcare, for now few years in a row, healthcare carriers lose money on the town of Franklin. We're at about 112 what's called loss runs, which means for every dollar our employees or the town of Franklin pay in premium, it's $1.12 that the healthcare company is paying out. So they're losing 12 cents on the dollar right now. Those trends have been fairly consistent for this calendar year. There have been a couple dips below 100. We've had a couple of months that have been good. The second piece is there's far less competition in the marketplace. Even providers like Fallon, for example, that used to play into the municipal market don't do it anymore. They don't do the commercial market. So there's a big shakeup when Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts merged. That took away a huge competition piece in the marketplace, and now they're called .32. And the biggest reason of why those numbers are so high is in calendar year 2024, we had some extraordinarily high claims, life or death claims, cancer, bone marrow transplants. I mean, some pretty significant stuff. Just to give people an idea, we also, as an organization, just simply consume. It's a weird way to say it, but we consume a lot of healthcare, a lot of urgent care, a lot of the small appointments that everybody does too, which are needed, add up. And so really at the end of the day, you kind of have a few rivers kind of confluencing into one area, and it's creating a system at which we're not a very competitive organization to go out to bid. We are, I will say, we have an insurance advisory committee, which is a legal statute the town adopted many, many decades ago. For a very, very long time, this organization has done what we've called bend the trend, which is essentially look at the market and try to work with our employee units. This is a grassroots decision. This isn't something that I just make. We sit in this room once a month with all of our union members. We have a retiree representative, and we go through all the scenarios. I will say this year I am extremely happy with the attendance from the non-union members, the retiree, and all the unions have had representatives at every meeting. And they have already started the decision-making process by taking some of the options that would not be favorable to our employee base off the table. And we're starting to narrow those down. So right now, as we sit, again, the schools have not totally calculated what that 5.3% increase would be over what we assumed already, which was 13. They'll do that calculation, but we can take a pretty good guess that it would probably be, somewhere around $500,000. So that's where you get to the 4.75 million. And that number, when the schools submit their budget for the budget model for January, it will include in there what the 18.3% will impact their overall request. This is not a final number. We are doing competitive bids right now. We have a meeting this week with the IAC, and we'll have another one in January. Our group has been working very, very hard, and all of our employees have been working very hard to try to make a decision as early as possible. But I also want to closet with everybody by saying we're making such an early decision that oftentimes when you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 months of positive claims data in a row, that can impact rates a significant amount. So I think the community wants to be cautious not to make a decision so early that because of our impatience maybe on other issues, we want to still make sure the employees are making the right choice, but also making sure that if we wait another couple months into March, maybe we'll have more favorable claims data, which would be very beneficial on the open marketplace for a competitive bid. So that's generally it to the model in a nutshell. I'm happy through you, Mr. Chair. Before I go through, well, really quickly, I'll just add on. 4.5 million roughly is a very large number. But there's still, I just want to remind everybody, and I list them out here on the first page of the memo, we are still very, very far away from actual facts. The departments submit their budgets at the end of this week. A final redistricting savings and economies of scale analysis still has not been done. The superintendent and all of our staff met today to walk through where we're headed with that. Collective bargaining has begun with all of the major unions, and we hope to have decisions obviously as soon as we can. Final health insurance costs are far from done. State aid comes out on January 22nd from the governor. She'll be at the MMA conference to announce her budget plans. So we hope at least 1.5%. We're hoping 2.5%, 3%, of course. And finally, one piece I really want to highlight before I take questions is local receipts trends. I've explained this many times, but it just bears repeating. In all likelihood, that local receipts number assumption for FY26 will be bumped up. But what we traditionally do, and many of you are probably familiar with this, we get to December 31st, that's our Q2 report. We'll analyze that, and I will bake that assumption of whatever that's going to be into the model in January for the end of the month. after local aid numbers come out, we will still, before I file my budget in April, per the town charter, we will look at Q3 local receipts as well. We always try to look at that end of March data of what's coming up, because we want to make sure, 5 years ago this March, I said in my memos, due to, barring any unforeseen circumstances, and then there was a hugely big unforeseen circumstance. So we do want to make sure we go through March to look at that Q3 to make sure our assumptions going into the next fiscal year are strong. So obviously very concerning about the growing deficit with healthcare, but also there are still a lot of decisions far away, so I don't think anybody has to panic quite yet. I think we have to make sure we see where these numbers go before we really calcify that number. Happy to entertain any questions from anybody, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Questions? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jamie, for the effort in trying to continuously update these. One of the things that looks very different here is that the trend has changed. So before we were looking at kind of, the 3-4 million range, and it seemed like that was decently steady. Obviously, there's fluctuations year to year, but here now we're looking at 4.2 to 4.7, as you mentioned, going all the way up to 8.5 by year 5. What was the kind of big shift there? That's a great question, Paul.
So I don't, again, for another night, a pension 102 lesson, but I did include in the packet, and it's not necessarily for an item that we're going to walk through, but I wanted people to see the letter that we wrote to Norfolk County, which, by the way, was all done within 24 hours, and if every town had a chance to sign on to that, probably the whole county would have. Really what that's about is about when you fully fund your pension obligation as the county. And long story short, they did a bunch of reforms during the Great Recession. Now the minimum retirement age is 67, for example. For an average employee, it used to be 65. They did a lot of cost containment measures during the Great Recession 15 years ago, but they also kicked the pension obligation out to a further date, and that was about 2030. Well, now we're getting close to that date. And what you see in year FY27 and beyond to FY30, Paul, with the 8.4 million, those numbers reflect a vote that was taken by the pension board that essentially said, we are going to try to fully fund this by 2030. And as I outlined in the memo, if they had kept that deal in place before we intervened in October, which none of us had any heads up on any of this, that would have meant a $7 million increase on that one line item this coming fiscal year. That's double the tax levy. And what's frustrating is, yes, the pension system has their own autonomy, and yes, they report to PARAC at the state level, but what was disappointing to us was it wasn't like the downriver consequence was even considered when they did this, and we weren't even engaged in the methodology. Not shocking to anyone, the previous actuary of the previous actuarials of years past, Dan Sherman, who you all know, for the county, didn't either renew the contract or was not the actuary in this analysis. They hired a new actuary. So all of the assumptions changed with the directive to try to fully fund the pension system by 2030, which would have resulted in absolute calamity in almost every community in Norfolk County. And fortunately, at the last minute, we had to do the very uncomfortable meeting with kind of very tense meeting. And I do give the pension board a lot of credit for hearing us, and they rescinded that proposal. They went through with option 3, which is in the packet, to fully fund it by 2035, which really made that increase for this fiscal year, only 300,000 or so above where we were at the last fiscal forecast. They have committed to do another actuary this winter, and they're going to look at the comments we gave, and they're going to do another one. And we don't know what they're going to do yet. We don't know whether they're going to still try to fund it by 2030, 2032, 2035, or beyond that. And so we don't know where those numbers. But make no mistake, those year 2, 3, 4, and 5 to 2030, those numbers are inflated at a higher level because they assume the original pension vote of funding by 2030. We at least need to show it until there's another decision by the Norfolk County Retirement Board.
So to your point, it could be that bad, but as you've said all along, we don't have all the information at this point to be able to actually predict out 5 years.
No, and I think I think Norfolk County might be a sliver behind, but there's 111 pension systems in Massachusetts, right? Brookline has its own pension system. Needham has its own pension system. Worcester County has its own, right? Every rule is the same. All the rules are exactly the same. Everything. They just have different fiefdoms. But they all operate under state law under what's called PARAC, which is an acronym for the statewide retirement system. So it could still be that bad, but I think most pension systems are facing a similar situation. I would pray that the legislature makes some sort of adjustment to this at some point in the next couple of years. But I've also been there before when they've done these before, and as Amy knows, this is a very, very hard debate at the state level. But if every pension system in the state of Massachusetts is going through the similar dynamics, you're going to see the same situation in Franklin statewide, and how the state can allow that to continue to happen, given all the other cost pressures that we're seeing at the local level, would be unthinkable to me. But we're going to have to wait and see what the lay of the land is come in the spring.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of switching directions a little bit onto one of our other big cost drivers, looking at insurance. You know, I know there's a lot of conversations around that. Are there ways that we can look at the units that we're actually utilizing to bargain there? And this, I'll admit a little bit, that we're looking to bargain with. So instead of looking as a town-wide unit, being able to break it up and kind of concentrate things down and look at some kind of mechanism on the back end to maintain costs for groups that may see much higher rates, but being able to concentrate those where you might have, you know, certain organizations that might have very low run rates and certain parts of the organization have very high. If we could concentrate those kind of across the board, potentially saving the town a lot of money in certain instances in areas where we do have significantly higher expenses, being able to compensate there, basically cover more, so that we're not suddenly making it very challenging on people, but potentially lowering the overall cost to the town. Is that something that we can look at, or do we have restrictions around that?
You certainly have a restriction with the formed IAC. I mean, the presidents essentially of each union serve on that committee. Both Donna, Grady, and Joe Corey have been stalwart members. I think Joe's probably been to every meeting we've ever had. Their attendance is pretty strong on the school side. Our units do the same. Unfortunately, we've been victims of our own success on this issue. If you split it up, you're going to get into a cost. You're not going to save money. My educated guess would be that you're not going to save money. Predominantly because you're going to just escalate costs up, just like you would do with a COLA, right? So if one unit gets this, other wants to kind of get the same or leapfrog, and you get an unsustainable kind of ladder of cost. The reason why the IAC has been effective is because all the money for healthcare is essentially still coming out of the same pot, right? Tax revenue. And so, you know, over the years, and if you look in our budget narrative, there's some sections in there, if you look at some old ones, where we've shown some historical data on healthcare trends throughout the organization. And I would say that a couple things. One, if we did it unit by unit, we'd be in a much farther and bigger deficit than we have now, probably an exponential cost. And number two, I would go back, and we know about the 68-32 split. That's no secret. You know, that was a decision the town made back in 2009. We used to be up at 70 or 75. You know, Brian or you know, Councilor Pellegrini may remember former employees that were here back then. But when the Great Recession happened, and to preserve some level of jobs, the IAC made the decision to go down to 68-32, and we've never been in a system since where we've been able to really claw out of that. You know, a lot of the things that we've done over the years, like introduction of the high deductible HSA plan, has saved employees a ton of money and saved the town a lot of money. We've shown that on the budget sheets, you know, in previous years. But I would also mention right now, healthcare across the board is a 15% number that we're seeing at virtually everywhere. And I just want to also caution people to smaller communities, right, like a Millis, their subscriber base is much smaller. In fact, I believe, and Karen or Ken might be able to correct me, I think maybe only 55 or 60% of our employees actually take town insurance right now. It's a very small percentage. It is not 100% of our employees. So there's been a lot of factors, and I mean, it depends on how deep you guys want to go into this, but there's a lot of factors like that that have kind of saved the day a little bit, because if we had 100% of our employees taking the insurance, our budget discussion would be a far different dynamic as well. You know, even the Obamacare 26 and over was a change that we've been adapting to over the last 5 or 6 years as well, because people have retired on and younger people have come on. But overall, right now, the big issue is just simply the large claims. The loss runs are really not good, and as we head into a year where 5 years ago there was a lot more competition in the market, right now there's just not as much competition in the market. We are going out to bid. We are getting competitive quotes. We are looking at other consortiums. We are looking at other partnerships. We've discussed this all with the IAC on a monthly basis, and so, you know, we're trying to do the best we can to mitigate costs. My guess is that through some tweaks, that 18.3 will come down to 16.3 or 15, somewhere in those ranges. You know, we're obviously going to try to work with everybody to get those percentages down, but I won't obviously know those final decisions until another couple months.
Thank you.
All set, Paul?
All set. Thank you.
Councilor Chandler.
Through you to Jamie. I just want to piggyback on what you just said, Jamie, just so people at home know. The town of Franklin, way back, was one of the first towns, definitely one of the first towns around to go to that 68-32 to save us money, when other towns were still 90-10.
Yeah.
So just people know that our employees in this town really gave up a lot at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the reason that we're not at 100% people taking health insurance is because our premiums are very high.
That's right.
Compared to maybe somebody's husband or wife at their job could get a little lower. So our premiums are very high for the employees right now already. Thank you, Mr.
I was
Chairman.
just told it's 54% of our employees.
No.
54.
Well,
Thank you,
I
Karen.
can see why with the numbers that
Yeah.
we're charging them.
Yep. There's no question Councilor Chandler's correct, and it's definitely a competitive disadvantage for all of our employees, school and town, on that issue. We'd love to get back to 70-30 and try to claw it, but that's going to result in some plan design changes as well. So we're looking at all options for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Chandler. Any other committee members? Any questions?
I'll ask one.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure the school numbers are right, because, so we had the budget workshop and we added, we just saw some expenses increase, the transportation increase, special education, healthcare salaries. I just want to make sure, are we keeping pace? Because I've had some conversations recently with some counselors who weren't aware that the school's health insurance was part of line 300, and I just want to make sure our line is increasing with that expense the same as the town. So I don't know, maybe this is a question for Jana or Dr. Dutch, but, and did you refer to this, Jamie? Were you saying that's like probably another 500,000?
That's right.
That's what you were talking about? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. You know me, I just don't want to like underestimate this number, because I know we already had so much loss at the schools last year, so. That's all I got.
Okay.
Just want to clear that up.
I just lost that point.
Councilor Frangillo.
Another 500,000 could be under the schools, line 300.
It definitely,
If
yeah.
what Jamie alluded to in his memo was 4.2 to 4.75. That 500,000 is a best guess scenario to this increase in health insurance to the schools that hasn't been.
That's correct, and we got done with our meeting at noon. I knew this meeting was coming up tonight, didn't want to miss the opportunity to speak to it, added it in at the last second, but obviously Jana and Bob didn't have the time to do that. That's why I estimated in the narrative. The 4.23 number is what's on the sheet, but if you add it in the first, third, fourth sentence there, fourth line, I say 4.23 to 4.75, because I already knew what their healthcare cost was, so I just did an estimate of an additional $500,000 or so that would be on there. It might not be that high, but
400, 500.
it might be 400, 500, but when the schools give us their actual, preliminary budget to put into the model, that number of 80.4 million would probably be 80.9 million, 80.8 million or somewhere around that range. But we just didn't have a chance to throw it into the calculation right away. That's why the narrative says what it says.
Yeah, I have other questions. I couldn't quite tell the agenda. I mean, are we just on open discussion at this
Yeah.
point, or are we?
Yep.
Yes. this
Anything
is-
about the budget?
We're having an open discussion now. I don't want to dig really deep into some of this, as Jamie alluded to, but any questions we have, now's a good time to be bringing them up. One of the things that I thought that I really wanted to get out of tonight's meeting was our calendar moving forward and agreeing on that, so I just want to make sure we allow the time to focus on that calendar and see how that works for everybody. But sure, certainly, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if this falls under the calendar or the budget, but this budget assumes 2.5 flat across all line items except for schools.
No, well, yeah, there's a little higher than 2.5, that's correct.
Yeah, at what point will we get to see, and I think maybe this is where it starts to get into calendar, at what point do we get to see what are the service impacts of a flat 2.5?
So I'll just read it. In this bottom paragraph of the memo, the superintendent and I talked about this before this meeting. We think, it's probably in the best interest of the public to see those service impacts probably in late January. As well as, I know there's been conversation and requests from committee members about what are the needs, right? And we gave some examples here: restoration of academic and co-curricular programs in public schools, fire and police capital, public infrastructure.
Sure.
Kind of an extension of, I think, this body's request from earlier this year. Our hesitancy is one, when you think about it, we're actually projecting a deficit for '26, but we're not there yet. So we'd have to show what those impacts are for FY26, but yet I haven't even seen the department budgets yet for our departments, and he's in the same boat. So it's probably best to get those level of service cuts probably around, well, first of all, after the governor files her budget. I mean, that's a huge moment, right? I mean, that really sets the baseline for what local aid is going to be. If she's at 2%, hypothetically, well, that improves the situation. If she's at 0.5%, that makes this all worse. And then from that baseline, we can at least do some conscientious assumption on the House and the Senate, right? Because we know they'll go higher. I added some State House News Service articles in there just to keep people in the loop of the stuff we're reading. We don't have to talk about it, but we'll probably be looking at some time in the mid to end of January. I have all my budget meetings with all the departments in the first 2 weeks of January. This is very accelerated timeline for our normal case too.
Yeah.
So we're really cutting out a lot of other work in our schedules to get this stuff done, including collective bargaining. And so we're guessing that it's probably most appropriate towards the middle to end of January after the governor files her budget.
And what is our approach? What is your approach in going into those conversations? I mean, we're lucky to have a very engaged staff who attend most meetings, and so that we're all aware of this situation. It seems almost 100% we're headed toward another override on a ballot, which means, okay, if that passes, we can do this. If it doesn't pass, we can do this. How do you approach those conversations in terms of identifying what should be on the assumed budget for an override versus, recognizing that the last one didn't pass?
Well, I mean, I think like any organization, I think the schools are in the same boat. I would speak on behalf of probably every city or town. And I think the first approach we try to do is reduce the need for any layoffs at any cost, especially given the fact that I think we all know the impacts to schools. I think we know the impacts to police and fire to some degree of an additional shift loss or you know, I think we are all seeing a little bit of the cuts to the DPW and so forth and so on. So I think you try to approach it from a creative way of trying to say, well, how do we reduce the deficit with as few redundancies as possible? You know, it may require, as time goes through the budget process, I mean, it's very frustrating to hear me say this, but, you know, our two hands are on the wheel, and every week we just look at the numbers, we try to have meetings, we try to go through all the stuff that we can, we try to do creative ideas, we try to look at ways to cost savings. One of the ways I would look at it, Councilor Frangillo, is, you know, for departments that don't have inflationary caused budget spikes, like say the DPW, right, because of gas or goods or services,
Yeah.
you know, I would look at my budget and say a 0% expense increase. I'd look at maybe the Board of Health and say a 0% expense increase, or the Planning Department, or Conservation, or, you know, you look at all those departments first and say, is there anything in there contractually that we have to do? And if there isn't, those are easy ways on this model to bring those numbers down, where I don't have to assume 2.5% on some of those budgets, right? And then that list up front is a big list. We want local receipts to really be very high. Collective bargaining is an issue, and I think a big question this year for the IAC is going to be plan design. We've been very good for 3 years. We have not changed any plan design since the pandemic. We've changed carriers, but we haven't changed any plan design. It's been a pretty decent 3 or 4 years for our employees. That's not to lack empathy on the fact of the 68-32 split, which is unquestionably a problem for everybody. Okay? But we've been through these budget discussions before, so I think people have a pretty fair heads up. But I mean, those are a couple ideas off the top of my head of areas that you would try to look at. One other quick note I'd make, had a meeting at Tri-County this week with all the other town managers about the budget and the update on the project up there. They did very, very well in their budget this year, and there's the way the formula works, you're a year behind, but it looks like we're gonna get a rebate on our Tri-County assessment this year, which we should get through the state budget process, which will probably save us a little bit of money, which is good news. So you look at things like that, and you just, you know, there's a lot in here. But the first thing we would go after is expenses, and obviously we try to do, I think, like the superintendent, we would try to do everything we can to avoid any redundancies.
Okay, my last ask, appreciate all of this. When you come forward, and maybe it's not at the same exact time, but soon after, one of the questions will be, okay, you know, level service and then certainly a failure of an override will have these service impacts. A lot of that is quantified in numbers of people and like amount of salt. To the best of our ability, if I could ask you to be tasking our departments with any metrics that we have for, you know, when we lose an ambulance, how many more out of town calls does that mean? Or, you know, we know the rate at which our road quality is declining, and we know how much money we need to keep it at a certain level. So starting to get a little ahead of, like, you know, quantifying some of the impacts of the service cuts will be, I think, helpful to all of us.
I think I agree with that, and I would encourage everybody to look at the budget narratives. That's not to answer your question, Councilor Virgil. I agree. I think all of our departments will bring those metrics and those concepts of, you know, what is one additional ambulance, or another $100,000 or $200,000 of snow and ice removal money. What does that do, right? I mean, those are all public safety threats. You know, and you're right. There are other cost increases that go from that. I've said that in my memos before. You know, particularly on the municipal staff. I mean, there's a lot of revenue generated on our side, pretty significant. You know, I know the schools have the same situation. So we try to prioritize. I think I said this last year during the tiers. The first tier was geared towards stuff also that doesn't produce revenue. Because if you cut something that produces good revenue, then it's like a double whammy. Not only are you reducing the staff member maybe, but you're also reducing our ability to bring in more revenue to offset our costs, right? That was a value I went through last year during the tiers, and that's where we came out on that tier 1 and tier 2 at the beginning, I believe. So we're happy to do that. I know a bunch of folks, they're all behind me. So that's, I think, the way we go. And I would assume that the superintendent would go through the same process.
I could just speak to that too,
Sure,
Mr. Chair.
please,
Just
go ahead.
similar to what Jamie said around our budget development, we're in the process of that now. We're also in the process of developing brand-new budgets for brand-new schools as they're reorganized.
All right.
So it's not like a rinse and repeat of what we've done previously because it's a whole different layout. We're working really hard to try to get that done, so lead today, but plan for tomorrow at the same time and build out budgets. Expenses, for example, when you talk about expenses at a school, you can't take like one school's budget expense and then just apply it. But as you unify 3 middle schools into one, what does the new line look? So we've been using a zero-based budget approach to what do we need and why, and trying to build out each of those so that we have a really good handle on what we're costing related to that to be level service. Same thing with staffing, with students and how they're organized, and we are planning to provide more information on that to the school committee and to the public and this body as we move through that process, but that's the work we're currently engaged in as we try to build this out.
Appreciate that. I was just gonna finish on a final point, although
Sure,
he
go
reminded
ahead.
me of another question. I want to be conscious of.
No, go ahead.
Okay, the other question that you just reminded me of. How do we, the reallocation of schools, how is that quantified in the current document, or is it not at all? We're waiting for,
It's not.
okay.
That's a great question. It is not calculated in this document at all. For the town last year, we said there was roughly $750,000 in savings between 2 full school closures. Obviously, that won't happen just because Kennedy will essentially become the ECDC, which means we still have to do all the regular stuff,
Yeah.
clean the building. Eventually, when the facilities department, once we've gotten a little further along, Mike will put his budget forward with those cost reductions on the town side, and I think the superintendent probably would do the same thing. Is that right?
We will. And what we'll do also is just look how we're organized and how we're staffed for level service with all the movement. Our goal is to try to come up, not only try, but put our budget forward that shows which positions are moving to which school for the reasons to support the budget.
And we've
Where
been,
there are economies of scale, and there's pieces of that as well that are included in that.
and we've been, in terms of the one-time costs of things that are going to need to get done to help the schools get ready for this. I've been very open with Lucas about this. We're trying everything we can through the capital program to take those one-time costs off this chart, not in here, and have it off budget through the capital program or some other mechanisms. And we had a redistricting meeting today for about an hour, and I think there's a lot of creative ways to reuse some things that we already have, some fences, and just to save 10 grand here, 5 grand there, 20 grand there. Kevin and Mike and Colin for the schools have been all working together doing walkthroughs of those buildings, but we've tried to prioritize using one-time revenues to pay for some of that so that it doesn't impact the operating budget and it wouldn't result, obviously, in a bigger budget deficit.
Appreciate that. All right, my final comments, I tend to be this person in these meetings, so I'll just keep saying it into whoever listens. A huge part of this, of our ability to keep up with our budget, obviously most of this is operating budget, expenses, and tax levy. But a small piece of it, at least as we continue to catch up, is in new growth. New growth, put in other words, is how we develop and grow as a town. That's both people having the confidence to invest in their own properties or having others move in and invest in their own properties, as well as new development in town. There are lots of opportunities to continue to grow smartly for the town in a way that's fiscally sustainable. I think that there can be a disconnect between that, and as just for one, so I can get it, off my chest. We look at a project like 19 Dean, which, if you haven't been following, was going to be 3 businesses and 8 apartments, and now is moving forward as no businesses and 6 apartments. That's a loss of local receipts, that's a loss of new growth. Now, that's only one property. It's also a loss of vibrancy and walkability and two public parking spaces and a whole bunch of other things. And that scaled over decision is a loss of real new growth income for the community that helps us chip away or keep up with our expenses. So just don't lose sight of how we grow and develop is a core part of balancing our budget.
Thanks, Colby. Any other questions or comments from the committee? How about from Chief?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. You'll notice that most of the department heads are here today. With your permission, we drafted a letter to the Joint Budget Subcommittee. We have copies for everybody that we'd like to hand out.
Sure.
And if you'll indulge me, and with your permission, I'd like to read it into the record, if we may, for those that are at home, on Zoom, and here in the audience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kobe.
You've always said you want to I was going to say, you could kick me out of set.
I'm going to break out the glasses for you.
Don't let the department see.
Dated today, December 17th, 2024, to the Joint Budget Subcommittee, all the committee members, regarding the fiscal 26 budget deliberations. Dear Joint Budget Subcommittee, we are writing to request that the Joint Budget Subcommittee prioritize no further budget cuts or reductions in service to municipal departments as part of fiscal year 2026 budget deliberations. Any further reductions in service will jeopardize public health and safety, increase revenue loss, create non-compliance with federal, state, or local laws and regulations, and diminish the overall quality of life in Franklin. Given that many of the budget meetings this past fiscal year went late into the night with significant public feedback, we as department heads feel we have not had an opportunity to speak at length about our own departmental budgets and what cuts and/or reductions will do to our operations and the services we provide to the residents of Franklin. With that said, we thought a letter to the committee may be more appropriate, productive, and efficient. At the September 11th, 2024 and October 23rd, 2024 Joint Budget Subcommittee meetings, as well as in other public meetings of individual committees, there has been mention of detailing specific cuts to the municipal budget, but no mention of detailing the schools. We believe the town administrator has already laid out the next level of cuts as part of his presentation in June, and further discussion on this matter is ill-conceived and unproductive. At the June 26, 2024 Town Council meeting, the town administrator went through the exercise of outlining 4 tiers of proposed reductions in various budgets across municipal departments to be rerouted to the school department in an effort to help plug the school's structural deficit. We commend the town council, town administration, finance and human resources staff for working diligently to identify departmental redundancies, to creatively streamline services, and cut almost $1.2 million of expenses out of the municipal budget to be transferred to the school budget, while also minimizing the impact to core services and staffing. As illustrated in the presentation, tiers 2 through 4 would cut an additional $3+ million from municipal departments to be transferred to the schools. Now that the town is entering fiscal year 26 budget discussions with a projected now 4.2 to 4.75 million structural budget deficit based on current assumptions, we would like to briefly outline the consequences of an additional $3 million in cuts. At a minimum, the scale of these conceived cuts would have the following impacts: significantly jeopardize the public safety of Franklin with reduction to police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and public infrastructure. Any further cuts would have remarkable and irreversible effects on a myriad of issues, from traffic enforcement to response times of police, fire, and ambulance services, as well as snow and ice removal, tree trimming, street lighting, pedestrian safety, and signage. Further cuts to these departments risk the accreditation of both the Franklin Police Department and certified ISO 1 Fire Department, which the DPW has a significant role in as well. Call volume has skyrocketed, and expectations are higher for public safety and public works. Further cuts undermine these trends. A counterproductive decline in local receipt revenues. Local receipts are revenues generated by departments and offset the costs of town staff salaries and expenses for services, many of which are required in state laws. Cutting smaller departments such as administration, assessors, town clerk, elections, planning, conservation, building inspections, the senior center, recreation, and the library reduces invaluable town services and in turn reduces revenue to the town. Town staff have worked tirelessly through the past 5 years to rebound from the pandemic revenue losses.
Chairman, I need my glasses as well. A decrease in new growth tax base. With fewer staff to administer land use projects or home improvement permits, permitting could slow down potential projects that constitute new growth and help grow the tax base. Franklin has seen a drop in new growth of almost 35% in the past 5 years due to market forces. Any cuts to the general administration of the town could further reduce this revenue source. Non-compliance with federal, state, and local regulatory compliance. Town staff performs a great deal of mandated regulatory compliance as outlined in state laws. The federal and state government are placing greater responsibilities, statutory requirements, and mandates on local governments. If cuts occur to our permitting departments, the town clerk's office and/or finance staff or administration, the town risks timely compliance related to grants, elections, permits, building code, health inspections, licensing, public records, the Department of Revenue, and much more. Exposing the town's AAA bond rating to a downgrade, raising interest rates of borrowing, and eating up a greater part of the budget pie. When the town borrows for projects like the Remington Jefferson remodel, the police station, and the Horace Mann roof replacement. A loss of quality programming, decimation of community lifelines, reduction in the quality of public amenities, inclusive of open space, conservation, and recreation areas, and a fracture of cultural and historical pillars. The deprivation of these community cornerstones predominantly affects our most vulnerable residents. Elimination of these programs that engage and create the entire community will result in reduced resources for the community connection and mental health services to the individuals and families of all ages. In the wake of the failed override, many residents called for the closure or reduction of hours at the public library, senior center, recreation department, and more. Any reduction in these services would have substantial impacts on the mental health and quality of life in our community, and significant impacts to recruitment, retention, reforms, and staff morale. Our departments have worked tirelessly on recruiting qualified candidates and show we have a strong retention strategy in order to help reduce turnover, saving the town money and improving productivity. As an example, the Franklin Fire Department has spent a great deal of time and effort making substantial reforms within the department, including improving how the town collects the revenues associated with increased services requested, including EMS calls. These reforms are intended to benefit the effectiveness and efficiency of the department. If a message gets sent that the increased revenues collected are not being reinvested back to the fire department as intended, confidence and morale are impacted, influencing our emergency services. This same dynamic can be echoed in almost all municipal departments. As department heads, we feel we have been held accountable over the years and have done our jobs to creatively reform our departments and create millions of dollars in efficiencies and new revenue. Municipal budgeting goes through a thorough line item by line item review each year at the Finance Committee. We believe the public conversation should be less about additional municipal cuts to be transferred to the schools, but rather we think it is prudent for the committee to take a deep dive into the school budget to see exactly where there are reforms, savings, or other options, such as addressing unfunded mandates with the state before cutting more municipal services.
We overwhelmingly support an override for the community, as the passage of an override allows our departments to remain solvent and not be affected by any further reductions. However, we are also willing to continue to work within the constraints of Proposition 2.5, as we have been directed to do by the town administration for years, in order to prevent staff layoffs or severe service cuts. We encourage the committee's public dialogue to revolve deeper around the school department and the extraordinary amount of money that is required to finance the schools in Massachusetts. Despite a declining enrollment of almost 35% since the district peak enrollment in 2008, schools account for 70% of the entire town budget, leaving less room for other services to thrive. No municipality can survive and thrive on the strength and excellence of its schools alone. All municipal departments, including the schools, are essential and vital offsprings of a vibrant community. Sacrificing or weakening one offspring or department at the expense of the other weakens the entire community. As has been discussed many times, most cities and towns in eastern Massachusetts appear to be facing similar financial concerns relevant to the schools. Thus, Franklin is far from alone. We hope the Joint Budget Subcommittee will take the time to dive deeper into the cost drivers of the school's budget. We hope the school committee and school district understands and supports our departments, as every department head and every member of the town staff work for the school district in some capacity. We are all affected by the financial insolvency in the school budget and desire to see them achieve their goals. We are proud and honored to be part of this community and for the opportunity to work with the Franklin Public Schools. As professionals, we all understand how unique our government structure is, and that not every community has municipal staff integrated with the schools. As has been discussed for many years, if the town and the school did not have this level of collaboration, taxes would likely be much higher, and services would be far less effective. We all work exceptionally well together and hope the Joint Budget Subcommittee can work to unify the community through positive engagement rather than dialogue about cutting municipal departments even further. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our concerns. We appreciate your time and are available for any discussions as the budget process unfolds.
Thank you, TJ, Jim, Alicia. Everybody, everybody. And just for the people at home, it was, got signed by majority of the department head and municipal. Is there anyone else in council chambers that has, please come forward. Name and address, please.
My name is Susan Rohrbach, 38 Philomena Way. So before I say anything here, I just want to make sure that the town services know how much I appreciate you as a resident of Franklin. So, you know, I've lived here 26 years, on the school committee for 10 years. And after reading that, I feel sad for us as a town, sad. Because what happens, I feel like year after year, is that there's so much, you know, we talk about this, the size of the pie. The pie is fixed at the moment. And so what happens every budget cycle is there's tension between town and school services over the pieces, how many pieces of the pie does the town side get and the school side get. And it creates this tension. I mean, I understand the last part of your letter, but the first part made me feel like it's town versus schools again. And it can't be that way this year. We've really got to get our act together, work with each other, and because we have a huge deficit problem. And it really isn't town versus schools. It's more funding. It's how the state funds us. The state funds the schools. And as it is, I mean, we get a great deal of money from the state for the schools. And I hate to say it, but the bottom line is this. The residents of Franklin, we are the agents of our own destiny, right? We're the ones that will determine our future. And I'm sorry to say this, but unless you make significant cuts, the only way to do this is through an override. So, you know, I appreciate all of you. I want the police to show up to my house, you know, not because I did anything illegal, but because I need your help. So I think we all want the quality of our town. We all really want to enjoy it. And it comes down to us working together as one to fix the problem.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Sherlock.
Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia Drive, Community Information Director, Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio. Two quick suggestions, Mr. Chairman. One, as we're going to have to, you and we as the group here, online, and as we go forward, we're always going to have this kind of catching up. What was missed? What was suggestion that in your agenda, and obviously working with the town administrator accordingly, have some of the action items so that you can recover those? Because one item in particular, I think you took an action prior meeting, which I think has also been achieved since, in terms of you did have a bargaining session from the council and school committee. Now it was executive session. I know you can't discuss what was in the session, but that at least can be brought forward to the community so that people at least are aware steps are being taken. The other action you had asked for is still in the schools on their timeline to deliver. But I think those two pieces will help keep this discussion moving because it is critical. I totally agree. But we need to have this conversation in a nice way so that everybody is, you know, brought along accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good points. Is there anyone else in council chambers that has a question or a comment at this juncture? Okay. Thank you. And moving to the next item on the agenda, which is really the one I wanted to spend the most time in focusing on, is kind of laying out the calendar. And we can allow Ken to speak. Please come forward. Normally, he would not be able to speak because Finance Committee, there's one Finance Committee member. It's not here this evening, so we can't allow Ken to speak. So,
Ken Ojuku, 73 South Street. I'm speaking now just because I think it'll lead into your next topic of conversation. You know, first off, I did want to react to that letter because I think it was excellent. I think it was very helpful, just recognizing the challenges that exist on the municipal side. We talk a lot about what's happening on the school side, but really it's it's both. It's a real challenge that we have to address in Franklin now. I do think there's a little bit in there was misconstrued as it's saying, well, it's either the schools or municipality. It's not. Again, it's both, and that's an important distinction just to call out. Now, in my mind, the challenge then becomes, in this room, I think people are generally aware. There are some people who are dialing in or will listen on YouTube later, and they'll have an idea. Some will, agree, some will disagree. I do think that there is an opportunity that we need to take advantage of to further educate Franklin, simply because not everyone's dialing in for a 3-hour meeting every couple of weeks. It's very difficult to stay abreast of the conversation. And I think there's an opportunity for us, especially recognizing the needs that exist on all sides, to be a little bit more out there, be a little bit more in the community, sharing information, spreading information, even if we don't have an override. And I am not even saying we need one. But just making sure that the community knows where we stand today. And I do not believe that they do. That's the challenge. So if there's anything, my ask is, how can we better inform our community, the fellow residents of Franklin, about the situation that we are in today?
Thank you, Ken. And that's kind of leads into this next piece. This is something that Jamie, Lucas, myself, and the administrative team have been talking about. How do we get out there? How do we get the information to as many of our residents as we possibly can? So we put together, based upon the timeline from Lucas and the school budget and the town and the state, we kind of put together a calendar of meetings to have. And one of the points that I made to Jamie as well, to Lucas, is we need to do this outside of here, outside of the council chambers. We need to get out there, go different places. So we tried to identify a few different places that we could go to maybe draw a little bit different audience, trying to get as much information out to them as we possibly can. So Jamie, why don't I let you go through what we've, and again, this isn't cast in stone. This is up for discussion tonight to see if the committee agrees that this is the right approach. This was just our idea.
So through Mr. Chairman, through the committee, I just laid out, some of these were, and again, some of these are gonna be tentative. I know that the school budget related stuff was like tentative dates. Those are gonna change probably a little, but I just wanted to outline what the winter and spring looked like, okay? And, and just to blend it all together to the best of our ability, I put on here about 5 or 6 joint budget listening sessions. I'm not sitting here pretending everyone's gonna make every one, but I think in absence of any roadshow that happened with any third-party organization in the fall, or any outreach, or any debrief, or any listening, it's just at least my opinion that we haven't really listened to the community in the wake of the override from last June. I mean, there's been some comments, but we went through a heavy budget season in June and July, and then we kind of took off. We came back in September, and I know I said it at the time, discussions in here are not going to help, I think, Ken's goal of getting people on, just knowing what's going on. People, for whatever reason, it's late at night, it's on TV, I don't know. But we tried to lay some out, and I tried to do it in a diligent manner. I still believe until we have the governor's budget, it's hard to go out to the public and have a cart before the horse conversation where we don't even know what local aid is, and we don't know some of the other stuff that we talked about earlier tonight. So I tried to lay it out based on her announcement of the budget on the 22nd. We set up like 5 or 6 joint budget subcommittee listening sessions. I did them at venues throughout the community where the entire community will feel comfortable coming out to. There are a lot of people who are, the Franklin Elks is one of the sites that we reserved for a meeting on January 30th. We also did propose one at Remington Jefferson. We proposed one at the high school in March. We proposed one in the senior center at night. We also proposed one at the senior center during the day, which I firmly understand all of you work. but still, at least Lucas and I can be there for the Veterans Coffee and just try to get out information, I think, after the governor's budget's filed on the 22nd. That first one on the 30th, I should at least have some preliminary sketched out model based on local aid, which is a huge, huge factor. We've tried to spread them around geographically around the community. We've tried to make them comfortable venues for all populations within the community. We also do not have the time to do 12 of these, or 10 of these, right? I mean, we're trying to boil it down to 4, 5, 6. And also winter's coming. I'm gonna guess that one of these gets canceled for some snowstorm or something. We have to at least be prepared. We can't put all our eggs in one basket and say, let's do it February 12th, and then we have a nor'easter for a week and everyone's slammed and can't come out. So we tried to, put together a comprehensive look at what those meetings would look like. Some of the schedules are a little awkward. I know they may not work for everybody, but March 4th is at the senior center in the morning from 9:30 to 11:30 because most seniors don't want to be out at 7 o'clock at night, so if you want to debrief with them, during the morning is a very good time over coffee. We have a couple in the Common Grounds Cafe, one in the high school auditorium on March 12th, and I spliced in between just some of the other tentative dates that are on the calendar that people can link towards. So, people may not have time right now or in January, but to Ken's question, now if the group agreed to do all of these, we'll put together, a flyer, we'll put together some listening tour t-shirts or something, we'll just try to do some word of mouth to get out there. And I think for those that are interested, I think the people in this room have to go get other people to come in. I've said this before and I'll say it again. All of you in this room and listening at home have to go talk to other people. You have to do it without this committee. You have to do it without all of them. You have to hold coffees. You have to do things on weekends. You have to do one person by one person by one person. It is exhausting. It can be painful. It requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice. For those of you that have done these things before, it's a life commitment for 6 months. It's not just Birchwood, but it is also Honeydew, Dunkin' Donuts, Rome, other sites, all coffee shops, Intermission, you name it. People should be getting in each of those spaces. A lot of people crowd up at 6 in the morning at those coffee shops. McDonald's has a huge coffee crew. I don't know all the venues, I'm just giving examples, okay? All of you that are in this situation, unlike myself and some of the staff and Lucas, where we can't really go out and do some of this work, have to go out and begin now, and if folks agree to these dates, at least you can tell people, hey, oh, I know you can't make it in February, I know you're busy and the kids are going away on February vacation, but in March there's a couple meetings, maybe you can come to the senior center during the day, or maybe you can come to the one at the high school. And I think what that does is set up at least a dialogue for my regular schedule, which is the counselors know, usually the first week in March, I put out the more likely than not preliminary budget, which is based off real numbers. We hope by then we'll have health insurance, we'll have CBA, we'll be able to at least get some of those done where we'll have guaranteed numbers in there. And then in March, you're looking at probably a discussion on the situation and what the community wants to do. And then you're looking at April. We already have the date set. The schools have already given us their preferred date for Finance Committee hearings, which is the Monday, the 28th of April. And then we'll do the Finance Committee hearings that week. And then, of course, the council hearings on the budget later in May. Happy to answer any questions. Oh, and then on January 15th, I will do the cheap plug for George for him. Is our monthly Finance Committee meeting. And that's a pretty big one. We're going to go through the FY25 capital plan, which will include some of the costs to help the schools out with the redistricting. We will also, at the request of the Finance Committee, from a few members. The school finance department and Lucas are gonna give a presentation on the hold harmless situation. And then at that meeting too, we'll look at year-to-date expenses at the mid-year and revenues and just try to give a quick report. If there's any rumors out there, if a little birdie told us, you know, we might have some rumors on what the governor's budget might be, but we'll see what happens. I'm counting on the MMA conference is probably gonna be where their splash is, so. Open any suggestions from folks, but I think we tried to cover the whole community geographically, in venues that are inviting to hopefully all residents that feel comfortable going to a certain place, and tried to have a few in case there was a winter snowstorm. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Okay, this is totally open for discussion. None of this is cast in stone until this committee decides that it is, or part of it is. I'll start with that, Lauren, go ahead.
Okay, all right, thank you. I have a couple questions. Are all of these meetings listed on here open for the public?
Yes.
So the January 10th school committee budget workshop, that's open to the public?
Good question. I don't know.
It would be a posted meeting if it's a budget workshop and be open to
Okay,
the public if we have a quorum.
okay.
The dates in here, I just want to say, they're, the 14th is not a date we'll recommend our budget in January. It will be pushed out to late January to the February dates, just to be clear about when these were first put together.
Yeah.
That's a shift.
Understood that there would be a little.
But we will have a preliminary number from them at a staff level, like by at least the time we get to that, after the governor's budget, we'll at least have something to plug in that will be more representative of the number that's up here right now.
Yes. We will have better numbers for
Better
the
numbers.
overall picture. It's just, I won't be doing a superintendent's recommended budget on January 14th. I just want to be clear.
Okay.
That kind of leads to my next question is, I love the idea of all the listening sessions and all the different locations, but what would be used as the main, not agenda, but, you know, if we don't have a preliminary number to go talk about and sort of gather feedback regarding it, you know, if we have a $4.5 million deficit and we go to the senior center and we want to get their thoughts, you know, if we don't have something to actually go talk. So that was gonna be my next question, is will we at least have something, I know we have something now, but a little more meat on the bone come January 30th, when the first listening session happens?
Yes.
Okay. And I forgot my third one.
That's okay.
If I remember, I'll come back to you. Okay, thank you.
I gave you a real short answer.
I was like, I needed a minute more. Okay, thank you.
But he gave you the right answer.
Yep,
Yeah.
we will. And that will include the governor's numbers in that January 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Just through you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. We have a lot of work to do. I'm watching YouTube. Right now, there are 13 people on it. And I think there's 12 on Zoom. So there's 25 voters, sort of, out of 30,000? Or 27,000, whatever the...
24,000.
24,000 people. The other thing is, I don't think there's any Saturdays or non-work days on here. I would like to suggest that perhaps a Saturday morning might, I know I'm a local town junkie. Medway does a lot of things on Saturdays because they get a bigger crowd. Just a thought, I don't know where or whatever, but a Saturday allows people who work, like Nicole. Nicole is stretched to the limit. She couldn't come tonight.
We can do a Saturday. I'm guessing Nicole is stretched to the limit on Saturday and Sunday too.
But, you know, an example.
But I'll try to recalculate and see where there's a good option for a Saturday. If that's what the rest of the group wants.
I just think there's more people available on
I think
Saturday.
that's a good point, George. I think a Saturday would make a lot of sense myself.
But while I'm here,
Sure.
that doesn't mean that we and they can't just stick our nose into a group of people
Absolutely.
anywhere. I mean, I'm going to the senior center budget meeting. Not budget, it's not budget, discussion. But I offer to go, and I'm gonna bring some of this stuff with me. It's a small group, but they talk to the rest of them down there, and that's a key group to get this thing passed, a very key group. speaking as the oldest person in the room, I might add.
You're older than McLaughlin?
I am more here than he does. No ambulance for you.
Wait till you see that response time.
All set, George? Yep. I'm just gonna go right down the.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody's
This is
thoughts.
fantastic. I'm all for this. I will make myself available for all of the meetings. I think that, I guess, just kind of philosophically, like, you know, we came in, we crunched the numbers. I think, like, as far as getting out to the community, I do think it's critical that, you know, we have this group, One Franklin, that's pushing for this override, which I'm not the chair of anymore, by the way. So this is good to know. And they need backup, because when they put out information, and I'm sure through the chair, your crew didn't love the newsletter that came out, but we took it just right off of, you know, that meeting that was post-override. So I think also, because I want to address the letter. I should have done this before when you were asking for comments, but I think I just want to make sure that, and I think that the different department heads know this, because I've done, you know, enough work over there, and I know you have tremendous respect for Lucas Jagir. You've made that clear to me. So I think that, you know, how I can't speak for the whole school committee, but we are certainly not advocating for cutting senior center hours or shutting down the library. I think, like, certainly not laying off emergency service. I think that a lot of parents wrote in after the failed override, and that's going to be kind of expected, you know, when the parents kind of come off this. We get emails from the parents all the time. We're desensitized to this. But I think that when it goes out to the town council and everything, everyone goes, whoa, these are the people we don't typically hear from, because they're in, you know, out of town during the day and things. So a couple things that I just sort of circled in the letter, like Chief Lynch referenced, that there's you know, massive drop in growth, and that's impacting our town. We're not in our heyday anymore. Low confidence, morale within the station when things like this start getting out there, and I'm sure Lucas could speak to the confidence and morale of the teachers. A lot of teachers bailed last year. School budget goes over line by line. We have an entire governing body. You know, the mandates that come to us too are intense. I remember 2 years ago, Jeff Roy was at the, we had a legislative forum at the high school, and he said, I'm not going to impose any more mandates on the schools that aren't funded. Like, he was just like, I can't do it anymore, like, to you guys, because he's been chair of school committee before, and he knows, and Tom's been chair of school committee. So I think that we relate to everything you said, and I just, I believe in the concept of the One Franklin, and I think that we can get there. I think that we've got department heads right now that are highly, highly respected in the community. So I think if we get out there, I know that Jamie and Lucas can't be the ones out there advocating for an override, but I think that it's like, Mark Minichelli put out that letter, you know, from the Natick town administrator. People listen, like, you're the CEO of Franklin. Like, if we're in trouble, people are gonna believe you. You know, like, it's like, you're still, like, entitled to give the facts of what's going on. And that's what I wanna, right.
I've given
So
the
as we,
facts.
And that's exactly
that's what we
they can
need, because,
provide that information.
yeah, and I think that, like, we can help get it out into the community. And this is awesome, all these meetings that you're booking. And we have started getting people calling us and saying, hey, I'll host a coffee hour. Ted Cormier Ledger reached out and was like, you know, let me schedule something at my house. And all the parents who are paying, like, the fees. I think it's important that we say as a community, and everybody knows, that Franklin Public Schools no longer sponsors sports. That's like a big deal. When you say that in the community to, like, other towns, they're like, what do you mean, the Panthers? Like, you guys are crazy. It's like, we don't, because we've just, we're razor thin with our budget, and so I think, everybody knows how I feel. I'm like the crazy override lady, but I've just been like trying to get this done for a couple years. I think we can do it. I think even though there's only, 25 people watching on YouTube, 11,500 came out to vote, so I think we can do it, and I'm all in. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I got. Right now.
Melanie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, the schedule, all right, I think this is a great idea. I love the outreach. I agree with George about some weekend.
Sure.
And I don't want to put too much pressure on the staff, though. I understand it's like, it's a weekend, and you're already doing a lot of stuff here for us, so. But I like the idea of a weekend. I like the different times of day, which is really good in the different places. I just want to thank everybody else for their comments and the letters and all the fellow committee members' comments. I know Kobe and I talk about new growth all the time, and it's really important. We can't stand in the way. We have to do it the smart way. So thank you all for being here and all the comments, and that's it.
Thank you, Bill. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you, just like to thank you, thank Jamie and your team, and Lucas and your team for putting all these dates together, lining all this up. It's a lot of work. I know, Lucas, Jonna, Bob, your whole team of moving up the entire budget cycle this year. It's just a monumentous task considering everything that's been happening this past year. I think it's happening right now with the redistricting, so thank you for that. And I think this is wonderful that we have this all laid out and we can see the big picture of how all different parts of government and different departments, how we're all interconnected, how we really are all one Franklin, we're all one ecosystem. It all affects itself. We're all in this together. And I think having this all here just shows that, and I do love this idea and all these different scheduled dates of going to different venues and meeting people where they're at, who might not otherwise come here and places where we might not otherwise go. I would also echo the agreement that I think a Saturday or someday, any way that we can be more accessible to people at better times is a tremendous benefit as well, and I look forward to attending as many of these as I possibly can, so thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Brian?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. To Jamie, I guess, I always have to ask the tough question, because Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna get this question from people that some of these other people might not get. Okay, so the town can do certain things to help push the override.
That's correct.
But like, you mentioned like at the Elks, okay, we're renting the room. So I'm gonna get that question, well, who's paying for that and why are we paying for that?
Yeah.
But that's all, I need you just to say that's all allowed.
That's all
what I'm
allowed.
getting at, yes.
Yeah, that's a formal committee meeting. We're not gonna leave our good friends at the Elks, especially with the incredible charity they give, leave them hanging.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other sites, on the north side of town, there's not really a public facility that's close. And I do think that, some residents that may not feel more comfortable to go to the other locations will definitely feel more likely to go there. And I think it's incredibly important that all of you listen to as many people from different factions of the community as possible. The engagement piece has to be not just a political science of like, oh, it's the people who we think are gonna come out or whatever. You really gotta get out to get everybody. And that's why we call these listening sessions, right? There's probably not gonna be, I don't wanna do a PowerPoint, I don't wanna do any of that. It'll probably just be a handout with the budget model, with like a cover sheet as a preliminary thing to generate the discussion. But we haven't really gotten to that place yet. We'll work together to try to come up with something together. We're gonna try to limit the amount of government talk, just give people the straight information. So, but we can do that as a formal committee.
Yeah. No, I needed just that clarified, because, again, now there'll be a janitor at the schools, so I need to be able to say that back to people, that's all. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Brian. Kobe?
Love this. Love that we're going out to more places. Happy to be that all of them would support a Saturday. And then, I put my list of, this is the big question, right? How do we get information out to the public? we can't just assume that they all want to tune into local C-SPAN. 'Cause I'm assuming most of you don't tune into federal C-SPAN. So, finding other ways, I think a lot of that is going to be outside of this body, but I do like using at least what we can with this body of showing up in a few different places and having some listening sessions there. And very committed to, outside of this body, showing up to as many other places and really making sure that we engage the press as well throughout the process. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Colby. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, I did just want to say quickly, with regard to the letter that all the department heads sent out, I think this is a very important wake-up call for a lot of people. We've heard a lot from the schools. We have. There's been a huge impact there recently, and we are, as basically paraphrasing here, we are all affected by the financial insolvency of the town as a whole. We have this. This is a challenge that has been discussed at length over the past year and a half. And it's something where it really does come down to the idea that there's just not enough to go around. So we have this sense of infighting that can happen. But I do think that it's very important for people who've been paying attention to one aspect or another to recognize that really everyone is going through these challenges. The schools see a lot. The schools have had a lot of impacts. So have every other department. Just because they're smaller or because they've found creative ways to get through it doesn't change the fact that every single group in this town has had to go through something. And I really appreciate the fact that, the department heads were able to come together and really put the diversity of those impacts into words. I don't know if anyone, I'm sure will have this circulated later, but, it really says a lot that, you look at the last page of it and you have a lot of signatures on here from very different parts of this community, very different parts of this group, who all work here. And I think it's important that we make sure that we're listening to them. And as we're talking about these meetings during this outreach, and actually, George, I think you did a great job of kind of highlighting it, all these little pockets, all these little groups that we interact with, that we consistently work with, that we talk to, that we engage with, are just that one part. It's very easy to get to lose sight of the overall picture because our friends want one thing. Somebody else wants something else. And it really doesn't help the overall conversation if we just continue to say, yeah, great, we got to protect my part. And I think during these discussions, that's something that's going to be very important for us, is making sure that we recognize that either at this point in time, with the numbers that we have up there, we're either all going to sink or swim. There is no department that can cut their way through this. There is no collection of departments that can cut their way through this. And there's no way to just say, hey, schools have had a tough time. Well, the town has had a tough time. All the other departments have also had a tough time. And I think we need to recognize that and change that narrative to it's either we're all going to pass this or not. And as for the actual topic at hand, thank you. For the discussions that we have, are we looking to do this kind of like the redistricting meeting that we had for the school committee, where it's basically it's engagement. So people come, we might have like a whiteboard or something like that in a couple different spots with details, but then it's engagement. We're not all going to sit up here where people have to come up, give us your name, give us your address, one at a time, but really we can go and walk in the community, talk with people, answer those questions, and you can hop around to the different groups. Is that more of the format that we're thinking?
Hadn't gotten that far yet. You could do different ways on different meetings. I think our thought was at least, there's a lot of feelings and emotions that came out of June, obviously. I think it's been brewing for a while. And I think there was a lot of misinformation, there were a lot of questions, and I just think it's really important to listen to people. I think when you listen to people,
Answer people's questions.
and maybe, I'm sure people will have questions, answer people's questions in a slightly more casual, I guess, format.
Yeah.
We haven't really dug in. I think they're just open-ended to try to say, like, give us your thoughts on your life, your financial situation. Were you supportive of the override? Was there something that you didn't like? Is there something you want to see more of? I mean, I think it's just whatever people feel. I think it's important for all of you to hear that. There hasn't really been a community debrief on this issue in 6 months, and I still hear about it all the time from people. I know you guys do, and we'll hear it Thursday morning at 8:30 at our office hours. And I just think giving people a safe space to try to do that is important. In terms of like, Paul, your question about like, I don't know how engaged it'll be, and I don't know how much people do want to get into that, like where's people moving, where are the lines in the sand, and kind of Play-Doh, like getting in there and trying to form it themselves. I have a balanced approach. I think some ways that, for some people, that would be very, that would probably be a very helpful exercise. I also think a lot of people in the community, the most people, elect all of you, appoint you guys, and hire us to essentially kind of give them the straight information and basically try to lead the community and kind of give them a guidance on what to do. But I think these sessions can also evolve. You know, there's 5 or 6 of them, and I don't know what the right format is. I don't want to commit to a format and then have people not want to do it or make it complicated. I just think at the end of the day, for 6 months, we haven't really heard from citizens at large about how they felt about last year and where they want to go from here. And I think you've got a platform to at least engage that conversation with what's here now.
So, you know, I can appreciate that, and, you know, there's a lot of things to do getting this moving.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to suggest that we kind of look at potentially proposing a couple different formats and having that in writing, so people who are looking for certain types of engagement know when and where to show up. And then if we have great really great attendance and engagement in certain formats, potentially replicate that later in the, you know, we have 6 right now. If you're going to add one on the weekend or just rotate around, like we have options. But then another thing that I would love to see from this is I feel like, especially if we're having that kind of direct engagement, or if we're presenting, if we're taking questions, what might get lost in the mix is the summary. And really having that as a target on the back end of these, of really being able to say to the community, this is literally what we heard, not this is what we heard on Facebook, what we heard through the grapevine, someone got an email, but really to summarize all that public engagement and to be able to provide answers where we can. Some of these are going to be a matter of pointing to what you've already generated, some things, you know, that schools have generated, some might be in the, you know, the governor's budget, but to really kind of pull that all back together so that I think we can show not just that we tried, not that we talked to people, not that, great, we were all hanging out on a 7 o'clock or at 9:30 in the morning, but that we did something coming out of it, and that the community has something tangible to show for it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that's where your general discussion will then probably catapult from, right? Once you receive a lot of that feedback, what this group recommends to your other 3 boards, or how you move forward after that, I think you'll get a good feel as you go along. We'll be happy to produce a summary of that stuff, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to have it all cast in stone as we move forward. See how these things develop, see how these meetings go, maybe one totally different than another, as you said, just because of the audience that you have there. Lauren, you had another one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank
Paul,
you,
were
Mr.
you
Chairman.
done?
I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sorry. I went too fast last time. I didn't have time to collect all my thoughts. I've heard it, I think that we can't ignore the digital world. I think these are great. I think if you try and get voters one by one at coffees and McDonald's, it's gonna take forever. There are some Facebook pages that I know it's an evil cesspool at times, but it is unfortunately where a lot of people get their information, right, wrong, whether we like it or not. It is a place that people go to seek information. It's where this meeting will be posted tomorrow, and people will say, here's what they discussed at the meeting. There's a $4.5 million override. It is, you know, digital marketing is the future. You reach far more people in a faster manner this way. I'm not advocating myself to be the one to do it. But I do think, I mean, the fire department, when you post, call to actions, they are, there's nothing more attention getting than that post. When you see they're out, all 3 are out. If you need services, good luck, right? I think those are eye-opening. More posts like that. I'm not saying more posts, but I'm just saying engagement with, I know no one wants to do it. I know everyone hates Facebook, But it is unfortunately a place that we should think about as a part of this. And I know the town probably can't get involved in that. I don't know how to do it. I just do believe it is a place that you can reach the most people the fastest. Maybe it's just a place where you go and say, if we were to do one of these meetings, if we were to do a couple, what's the format you'd like to see? Where would you go? Is it a bar? Are people more, laid back having a drink on a Friday night? I don't know, they don't want to talk about this, but, maybe if you ask, right. Right, I mean, there might be a setting where you do get some of those people. We haven't heard a lot from the people who voted. Either way, there hasn't been a lot of advocacy, right? It's kind of been crickets. How do you engage those people? Because the override will come up again. And, that's it. I just thought digital marketing and online presence should be something we think about.
She's 100% correct. I mean, she's also correct that Lucas and I can't do that, and we don't have the staff bandwidth. I mean, we cut the communications person out of the budget 2 years ago. We had it split, but that position went away. We're losing capacity. Don't take this the wrong way, like I'm crying foul, but all of this work, him and I are done for 3 months. Like, we're not doing a lot of other stuff. Like, we're doing budget, redistricting, numbers, calculations, department meetings, getting ready for everything that's got to come up. To Lauren's point, I mean, I'm not a social media guy, as everybody knows. I know it's something that has to be addressed. And it probably has to be addressed from the negativity perspective too, right? Because I think negativity that's like a magnet. So I don't know how to do it either. I know we can't do it, but that's something that the community's gonna have to discuss. Maybe the community looks at other recent examples of towns that have had these same issues. I know there was a couple overrides in November in Medford and a few other cities, and I know there were other campaigns. There was 108 overrides, I think, last year. There's gotta be somebody somewhere that has a good lane on this thing, and I think it takes research, it takes sacrifice, and it just takes people that have to really sacrifice a lot of time in their schedules. And I know no one has the time, but we know what gets lost if we don't sacrifice the time. So I think Lauren's correct, and I think that's something.
Understood, and I agree with Lauren's point. Maybe there's something we can do with the summaries of some of these meetings. Maybe we can take those summaries, take our minutes. They're public record. Take our minutes of our meetings, along with the summaries, and post them. I don't think that would be that difficult to find somebody to do. But I think it's a good point, Lauren. Natalie?
No, I didn't have anything beyond what people have talked about, I think. I appreciate all the communication. I'm looking forward to these meetings as an opportunity to address a lot of those things that you see on social media, like I wanted all schools, and so, DPW to be damned and shut it down and shut down the library. I want to address that, as well as, the other side of things, like, I don't have kids in school anymore. I don't care about this. Like, you've got to be able to address all those little points and figure out the data points that will help those people realize that it is about the greater good that will help us all. But it's about figuring out these avenues to talk to those people.
Thank you, Natalie. George?
Just one quick one.
Sure.
I have the urge, I'm a social media person. I read all about Franklin every day. I have the urge to sit and type an answer, but I reject it in my mind, saying, should the chairman of the finance committee be doing that? I want to make it, there's no prohibition for us, is there?
No.
I mean, Ted Cormier posts a lot, and he's usually on point to the issue. But I see things that they're blatantly false, and I don't. But I'm going to. I'll just give you a heads up. But the phone may ring. I do. I just wanted to make sure Attorney Sorrell wasn't after me. That's all.
We're gonna need more fire department.
Okay.
Tom, may I ask one more question?
Oh, certainly.
I just, as we get out, because we're not gonna meet again for a little while, and in the holidays, and people are gonna see people and talk. And I don't always have Dr. Dutch here, so, it's.
He's been quiet over there.
you saw me.
But I think one of the big misconceptions out there is there's a couple things that go into the like schools, and I'm gonna put my school committee hat on because like I'm that's what I'm doing now. So 2.5% growth, live within your means. I hear that from a lot of the, no kids in the schools, it was good enough for us kind of rhetoric. So I think it's important that, and maybe Bob might be willing to talk about this, but I had a conversation about schools. So there's two things here. So the 2.5% live within your means, we are carrying health insurance. So when it spikes, it impacts us differently than it impacts each little department. It's almost analogous to Lucas, being the Jamie and each department head being like the police, fire, and everything. So it's hard to live within 2.5% when we get these sort of mandate spikes within our operating budget. So, and then Dr. Dutch had a conversation with me about schools sort of across the board in his experience, having trouble living within the Prop 2.5. So I think, it's not irresponsible or financially, just not prudent if a school is growing at 3 to 4%. I think that perception, we need to start really, to Felicia's point in the letter that you read, thank you, said, let's educate what the cost drivers are of education, because, I think that's going to be important. So, sorry, I'm just going to say that because I think that's, something that comes up a lot.
I couldn't agree with Ruth Ann more. I mean, just for clarity, the schools have never gotten 2.5%.
True.
At least in my tenure here. They've always gotten 3.5, 3.2, 3.5, 4.2, 4.3. I think where we're going right now, and I think, Bob knows this as well, is just all of these factors outside the norm are just contributing to the enormous amount of money that's in the deficit. And I think, I think it was said somewhere in the letter, I mean, I think schools have obviously been, across Massachusetts, been, for whatever reason, special education, a whole myriad of things, health, it's just and they're 70% of the budget, so that number is just gonna be higher based on the ratio, the proportionality of the budget. And I think that's why Natick's in their situation, Easton's in, these other communities that are already talking the way we are. And I agree, the schools have never gotten just 2.5%, that's where we start. By the time we get to March, usually that number is up around 3, 3.5, close to 4. Based on local aid and stuff, we usually get it up a little, a little higher. It depends on what the school request is, too. So, I don't know if Bob has any.
Bob?
Sorry.
You thought you were going to get out of this.
I was hoping.
Just in bringing the conversation that Ruth Ann and I had back to the forefront. It's very rare that a community lives within 2.5% as far as their school district. I can tell you where I was in Situate, it was much more than that. Had a conversation with some folks in Andover. They have baked into their town appropriation, it's either 3.5 or 3.75% every year, automatic, and they still have a $1.7 million deficit for next year. So I think you're seeing that across the board. So I don't think it's a perception, the perception is accurate that the schools are not managing their funds well. They're doing, having come from outside, they're doing a good job with the funds that they have available to them. And again, this is a unique structure here in Franklin. Most places, you either, you go to town council or to the select board and you submit your budget. Usually they'll the select board will, or the town administrator will give you, stay within 2.5%. Nobody ever does. When I was down in Bourne, in Upper Cape, dealt with 5 towns. None of those 5 towns ever lived within 2.5%, nor did Upper Cape, to be honest. So it's not a realistic expectation to think that you can live there. And the bottom line, and you've heard it for a year now, there's just not enough revenue coming in. Wherever that revenue comes from, and whether it's taxes, growth, other sources of revenue that you may have, there just isn't enough here in Franklin right now, and that's the bottom line. So until that's fixed, you're going to continue to have this problem, and fortunately, the schools have made some cuts over the last few years, so that last time we mentioned, we're looking at a $900,000 deficit at level service. Now it's a little higher with the health insurance change. But it's just going to grow exponentially over time if Franklin doesn't address the issue. So just outside perspective. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I add to that, Mr. Mercer?
You absolutely can, Lucas.
And I've been listening tonight and reflecting on everything that's been shared, a lot of information. Some are to-dos, some are just reflective points. This is my 3rd year in the role. As a school district, I can just say I've been poring over every budget that we presented and how we've landed where we've landed. We've done a line-by-line analysis. We cut 24 teachers last year. We're moving from 8 elementary and middle schools to 5. But we're doing the hard work. It's all part of the big picture, but I don't want amnesia that we haven't just lived through a tremendous amount of cuts and a full reorganization. That's how I've been spending my time, and that's how we'll continue to spend our time, with trying to build the budget and plan, build new schools from the ground up. That's tremendous work. I want to deliver on providing more meat on the bone, because I think it's a shared interest for us to have that information, share it with everyone, and try to build some consensus and coalition around some of the ideas of where we're landing. We are in the midst of that work, but it's obviously been this has been an exhausting cycle for multiple years. We're all feeling it. I'm certainly feeling it. I can speak for Jamie, I'm sure, is feeling this too. And we're trying to do the work to create as much solvency as possible within the school budget. And I said from day one, just to go on record again, I never have been a proponent of cutting other departments. I've said that since the beginning, and I maintain that, because the problem to me is bigger. And we're going to do our part as a school district to try to provide and present a budget that's as fiscally responsible as possible to meet the needs of the students, because I have to answer to my constituents as well, which are our constituents. And we all have our own slice here of folks that we need to answer to and provide that level of service to. But I needed to share that as I've just been reflecting, as well as just a point, we're going to do the work, we continue to, and we want to engage people in thoughtful kind of content, like detailed conversations during these legislative, I'm sorry, not legislative.
Listening.
Is it
Listening
sessions, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. And try to engage with the community in a productive way.
Thank you, Lucas.
I said one last thing. Just one last thing.
Sure.
Through you, actually, I just wanted to say thank you to all the department heads, because you guys have all the little fiefdoms have come together. And Jamie maybe can speak to that, because I think in a lot of other towns, it would be like, oh, let the museum take a hit, let this take a hit. But they all came together, and everybody's on the same page. And we're really, I think it says a lot that we're gonna all work together on this. So I think it took a lot for you to all sign this and come together. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments from the committee? Anyone out in the audience? No, Gus, you first. Sue's already had one time.
Right here.
She'll get a second.
How to get arrested.
Shane's got his gun out.
No. My name is Gus Brown. I'm the building commissioner of this great town we live in. And thank you for your kind words about the department heads coming together as a team. And Councilor Frangello said it best tonight, new growth. I know the override is critical that we get it. It's going to really cut into our services if its override does not pass. I can't stress how important this is. And Bobby brought up the 2.5%. That doesn't do it, doesn't cut the mustard. And Councilor Hamblin brought up new growth too. So as a town, we're bleeding with no new growth. No one wants the traffic. Nobody wants things built in their backyard. And as building commissioner, we take it to heart. Our department takes it to heart. And we all hear it day in and day out. The traffic this, the traffic that. We'll get used to it. It's here, it's not going anywhere, and we need it for the schools. We need it for the department heads. We need it for all of us to have a town that comes together. I work in other towns. I pull permits in other towns. Nothing is run like Franklin. I've been at construction in my life for over 40 years now. It's not like Franklin, trust me. There was a time when I wouldn't pull a permit in Franklin, but don't tell anybody. But it was because the way the town was run. Now we have all of you in place right now to make this work. Our customers need to know that we need this badly, and I just wanted to say that and get it off my chest. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anybody has any new ideas about, thank you. If anybody has any new ideas about growth or any ideas about growth, come and see me. But we get jammed up because no one wants it. They say they do. Colby, you're a great advocate for new growth. Mel, same thing. You deal with everything that we deal with on a daily basis too. And let's get together. Let's realize that the traffic is not going anywhere. Let's improve this town. It's always been built on growth. Thank you.
Thanks, Gus. Susan?
I just had a suggestion. Oh, you want me to do this again?
While the chief has to.
No, I don't want him to know my address.
Oh, we have ways.
Susan Rohrbach, 38 Philomena Way. I'm going to give a wrong address. Yeah, I know. Just so I had a suggestion. When we did our information or listening tours many years ago, we actually went into people's houses and did coffees, but that is time consuming and you're trying to get, it's hard to get as many people and do these little small group listening sessions. So one thing to consider is maybe doing it in a virtual setting so that you invite people to come in virtually to a Zoom session, and there might be a town council or a school committee member and a finance committee member who could just be there to give out information and answer questions. So that's just a thought.
Good point. Thank you, Susan. Jamie?
We can add because that's low maintenance for us, no facility, I think we could probably add a virtual option only. Just for that audience that may only tune in remote. That's a pretty low lift. So, and the last quick thing that I have for tonight is, as we approach the holidays, obviously we wish everybody a happy holiday season. New Year's resolutions are around the corner. Amy and I did a really great podcast today with Steve for our year-end review. It gives me goosebumps a little sometimes because I'm getting them right now, because when you go and you talk about what we're working on as a community and you go down the list and you realize it has been an exhausting 12 months, but the quantity of success and everything that we've gotten done in this community is actually extraordinary when you go back and look at it. I think as we move into the new year, with everything that's been said, hopefully, just like the town employees work really closely with the schools, and you can hear the support from all of us towards the schools, I think we'd ask the school committee that when parents or others that we don't normally deal with advocate to close the senior center, or advocate to close the library, or advocate to close the rec department, or want to cut cops and cut firemen, I think your voice in telling them, no, that's not the right answer, is a very, very, very powerful message. And I think we all have a choice when we hit the new year, and we get to January, to hopefully have a really positive attitude. I think you've heard a lot of that tonight from residents, as well as our illustrious building commissioner, who couldn't have said it best. But I think when we get into January, I hope we can all make a choice to be really positive, because I think being positive and being prideful in the incredible community that we're all a part of is really a huge part of what everybody needs to do. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your time tonight.
Thank you, Jamie. Chief?
Yes. Thank you. My van's coming to get me shortly. Back to my place, but so I got to leave quick. So I just wanted to. I listened to a few of the remarks earlier by some of the folks that we have after we read the letter, and I just want to reiterate. And I know I'm speaking for my colleagues, department heads, that there's no intention of being divisive with that letter. You can go back and listen to when I spoke at my budget hearings. I said that the fire department was never as close with the school department. And I said we have all of the respect, and I know I'm speaking for everybody, we have all of the respect for the superintendent and his staff. We respect him personally, professionally. Basically, this letter is about myself and the police chief and the DPW director were directed to come to these meetings, the first two meetings. And after listening to the couple of two meetings, we just felt, you know, it's time to advocate for us. Just as a superintendent should be advocating for his department. And we just didn't want to put ourselves in the position that we're advocating in April of May. That we think now, at this point in time, at the end of the calendar year, we're submitting our budgets this week. And then we went back to our colleagues, and does anybody else feel the way we do? And does anybody want to have a unified voice that we're concerned about our departments? We want to advocate for our departments. We are not being divisive at all. I want to make that perfectly clear. I respect him wholeheartedly. We all do. And we're on the same team. But we just need to advocate for us just as they do, and we just feel like this is the proper time to voice our concerns. I thought it was important to say that.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, couple hours. I think we've done a really good job tonight. I think we got a lot of information. Excuse me, out there. I also think that we're starting to see us coming together, like we've been talking about from day one. And I think we said it early on in one of the first meetings, we needed to start to build that bridge, get us back working together as a entire community. And I think you saw the start of that. It's short, maybe it was from a municipal letter, but it was the entire municipal group. So just as the entire school group gets together, and as we bring everybody together to solve the problem that we currently have, which is just being underfunded for what we need, for the services that our residents have come to expect. School level as well as municipal level, they expect a level of service, and we need to work to continue to be able to give them at least the current situation. So, with that, I think, Jamie, I think we got a good lead into this calendar. We need to tweak it a little bit. We'll get those dates out to everybody. And I, for one, will say publicly that if anybody is having a coffee or a tea or wants to have one and would like me to come, call me. I'll be happy to come. I did many of them when we were doing the high school. I'm not afraid of them. They're really a good opportunity to meet with the residents and get them factual information versus. And I'm sure many of my fellow committee members, George, I know, and I know everybody sitting up here, any one of us, call us. will be happy to come and speak to the issues that we're facing. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, one and all.
Thanks, everybody.